If you've ever played a game of Warhammer from a recent edition, 40k, Age of Sigmar, Fantasy Battles, whichever, and you've experienced one of the earlier editions too, then I think it's likely that you and I would agree that the rules that come out of Games Workshop have become more and more complicated as time has gone on. It could be that you played the original Necromunda and then the re-release, or Blood Bowl Season 1 and then one of the later ones. The structure of all of them has become more complex. It's not just more words and a few things going on top that work independently from other rules. There's a layered, interlocking, constantly shifting complexity that exists now that didn't exist before, and frankly, doesn't improve the gameplay in any way. To make it worse, the wording has more bloat as the company seems to suffer from a degradation of the use of clean and clear language. Almost as if the rules writers have now got a diminished education in comparison to the writers of old, which probably sounds about right, or maybe they're just intellectually lacking the capacity to produce something better. That also fits. Or another one I quite like, maybe they're so sick of how little that they are paid and appreciated and represented in their own work that it's some sort of deliberate sabotage. Core rules, detachments, data sheets that change mid-edition, balance updates, FAQs that rewrite how abilities interact, mission packs, terrain rules that feel like tax law, and line of sight rules that are utterly oblique. Although credit where credit is due, the new Necromunda line of sight and cover rules actually are a huge improvement from anything that we've seen come out of GW over the last 5 to 10 years concerning that particular rule. Army construction composition requires apps, spreadsheets, or a quiet hour or two of staring at a wall with a pen and paper, which, whilst I'm all for, because that's good for ADD detoxing and dopamine receptors and it's inherently right coded, here's the thought that won't leave me alone. That complexity isn't an accident, but it's also probably not entirely deliberate. It's a perfect macrocosm of Games Workshop itself. And if you fly up to 20,000 feet and look down, you see that it's also a macrocosm of the world that we live in now. Early Warhammer was almost primitive by today's standards. A handful of stats for each character or model type, a few pages of core mechanics, and you could learn the game, field an army of much simpler miniatures as well, so it took less time to prepare them and get them on the table, and you could finish a battle without needing a second language in rules lawyering. The company was smaller as well, a Nottingham-based workshop that made little metal men and sold them to hobbyists all over the world who mostly just wanted them to play, and all of them already had rules to do so because Games Workshop didn't used to produce rules. White Dwarf is probably just a zine back then, made by one person. Games Day didn't happen for a decade, nearly, or maybe more. And then it was a long time until Golden Demon came about out of that, the great big marketing event that it came to be. To make an order back then, you first had to get a copy of the Citadel Miniatures magazine in the catalogue, should I say, and then put a letter in it with the code and the name of the model that you wanted and the price. And you'd put that letter in the post along with real cash money or a check. For me, from my parents, I'd have to try and convince them to put that into a letter to get models sent to us. And that letter probably arrived in the hands of one guy who fulfilled the order. Now they've got a whole building, and I think they've got a load of robots in that building now too, just for that purpose alone, including probably a room that's in central offices too, next door. The decisions that were made back in the early days were closer to the paintbrush and closer to the tabletop because back then the founders were themselves artists, gamers, and nerds. And then the company grew. Global supply chains, factories and designers in one country, occasionally outsourcing painters from another, warehousing and distribution hubs stretched all over continents. Your plastic pellets and resin shipping through the same choke points that everything else has to go through on Earth. Although they do use airmail occasionally, if it's a critical kind of time period for a big box launch, they'll use airmail. Just further showing the complexity of their own shipping model. Pandemic hits, a canal gets blocked, a trade war starts, and suddenly the next wave of models can be delayed by months. The complexity and wide-ranging impacts of geopolitics in many ways is the same system that decides whether your new combat patrol box arrives before the rules change again. Internally, the company is layered in the same way as the rules are. I know, I worked there at HQ for 5 years. More departments, more stakeholders, marketing, IP protection, legal, investor relations, multiple teams and systems that all have to feed into the same quarterly reports and speak to each other beside the fact that they actually more or less exist in isolation. Layered, interlocking, and constantly shifting, like the rules. Managerial complexity then compounds. Every new edition, every balance patch, every limited edition character becomes a small act of corporate strategy as much, if not more so, than it has anything to do with game design. The rules have to be deep enough to justify the price of the books and the constant refresh cycle, and they've also got to be complex enough that if you master them, it feels like a real achievement, whilst also just remaining opaque enough that enough players never really quite feel finished with the product. They never quite feel the full satisfaction of knowing the product. And then I can't help but think that Edward Bernays, who, if anyone doesn't know, is basically the godfather of modern marketing, he didn't call it marketing, he called it the engineering of consent. He came up with the idea that you create the desire, you shape the environment, and then you make the product as a result feel necessary or natural or even moral. So, as an example, he got women to smoke cigarettes because he linked it to freedom, or he sold soap by inventing contests where people cleaned themselves as some sort of public performance. Now, the technique of it was never about the object. It wasn't about the soap. It wasn't about the cigarettes. In Games Workshop's case, it's not about the miniatures. It's about the meaning that was artificially and deliberately attached to the product. Games Workshop is masters at this. They are masters of this technique. The edition cycle itself is a form of engineered obsolescence wrapped in narrative. Your old codex is no longer valid. The second-hand market for out-of-print models becomes its own little trading floor. FOMO isn't a side effect, it's part of the design language. Limited editions, store anniversaries, event exclusives, the quiet knowledge that if you wait too long, the rules or the models will move on without you. You will not be missed, as the closing phrase of the 11th edition CG promo video hit me pretty hard, because it starts to take on a new meaning when you have this kind of framing around it. The community does a lot of the heavy lifting for free, right? YouTube does battle reports, painting tutorials, lore videos, tournament lists, goes on and on. And everyone who does that kind of content, they're just third-party validators. Just as Bernays described. The company doesn't ever need to put loads and loads of effort into their marketing, because the ecosystem that has been built around them, intentionally or not, amplifies the message for them. And then if you zoom out a bit further, you'll see this appearing everywhere. Global markets that very few people actually understand. Financial instruments that are so abstract that they only make sense to specialists and insiders. Supply chains that turn a simple plastic miniature into a node of a network that includes rare earth minerals, container ships, labour conditions, and currency fluctuations. Factional land wars, real life ones, not tabletop ones, disrupt the same roots that bring us our hobby. Information overload sets in. Bureaucratic institutions that grow more and more intricate the more they try to manage the greater complexity. The rules of Warhammer have become a miniature model of that world. Dense, interlocking, always updating, always shifting. Rewarding the people who can hold the most system in their head at once whilst quietly exhausting everyone else. The company that writes those rules has grown into a sophisticated commercial organism that has to navigate all of those same forces. And we, the players and painters, sit inside both systems trying to find a space that still feels like play. Is it progress? Is complexity the inevitable price of a living, expanding setting and a successful company? Or is it a kind of entropy that eventually makes loving the game harder than it is to leave it? Does the depth create richer stories and more skillful play? The depth in the rules? I don't think it does. I don't think it's necessarily even there to protect the revenue model either, though. When the rules start to feel like corptocracy and bureaucracy with dice, what does it do to the hobby? I don't have any clean answers. I don't know if anyone else does. I keep coming back to the same realization that the complexity of the rules is not separate from the complexity of the company, and the company is not separate from the complexity of the world that ships its plastic across oceans and sells its stories through the same attention economy that sells everything else. The phrase, so above, so below, just fits it so perfectly. In a way, we aren't just playing Warhammer. When you think about it in this framing, we're playing inside a model of the very system that shapes our lives. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm, and they both appear to have feedback loops. And once you see that, you just, it sticks. Anyway, what do you think? Does the increasing complexity serve the game, or does it serve something else, something larger? Am I just going nuts thinking about these kind of like meta aspects of the hobby and making these videos? That's maybe a question for me to answer. I know it's not a positive video like the last two were, but do you feel like these videos bring you value? Drop it in the comments down below. I really want to hear them, and I reply to all of them as a general rule, unless it's just completely retarded. And if you do enjoy the content and can help support it directly, join the channel, the Patreon, or Ko-fi. The channel has recently achieved monetization, apparently, here on YouTube, so I will probably be locking some of the content that exists on the channel behind that paywall, so you have to join it to watch them. It's probably going to be the more personal or lesser watch stuff that I don't really think benefits the channel, or it'll be like the old live streams where I'm like chatting shit and going mental, because those are the sorts of things that I only really want people who really like what I'm doing and want to support what I'm doing to be able to see. Anyway, that's the video. I'm Tom, people call me Madders, and you've been watching a mini Mad Lad. Go paint something, or read the latest balance data slate, or just stare at the wall for a few hours, probably do you some good, or all three, I don't know. As usual, question everything and have fun with your hobby.